Part 55. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 542. Young. Those who have never given birth to children. She is related by blood to the Queen Mother. Although what Tang Ning just said was all nonsense, every explanation was reasonable and well-founded. After filtering these conditions, there was only one suitable princess in the royal family, and that was Princess Yi Yang. After hearing Huang Chen's words, Tang Ning breathed a sigh of relief. If neither of the two princesses had given birth to a child, he would have to find two reasons to screen out Princess Yi Yang. He couldn't control how ruthless this woman was to others, but Zhao Man was beyond her reach. Obviously, Emperor Chen also thought of Princess Yi Yang, looked at her, and asked, "Manner is willing to sacrifice happiness for the Queen Mother. Yi Yang, are you willing to make some sacrifices for the Queen Mother?" Princess Yi Yang's body trembled and her face became even paler. She knew clearly in her heart that her father's words were not a question, but a declaration. Thinking that her blood would flow out of her body and her lifespan would be lost for several years, she felt dizzy. She cheered up and said, my dear, I am willing." Not agreeing would be unfilial. Whatever her father wanted to do, she would do it no matter what. She had no choice. The Queen Mother looked at her, shook her head and said, "No need, the AI family has lived enough. God can take this life whenever he wants. Don't torment these children anymore." This is also the filial piety of the children. Emperor Chen looked at her and said, "Yi Yang is still young. It's okay to lose some blood and essence. She can come back with replenishment. I hope the Queen Mother can see this world for a few more years." Tang Ning looked at Huang Chen and said, "We don't need the princess's blood right now. The Queen Mother's body is still mainly recuperating for the time being. This period may be 1 or 2 months, or it may be 3 or 2 years. During this period, I am afraid that I will aggrieve the princess. In order to ensure her blood quality, she can no longer eat meat. She should mainly eat vegetarian food on weekdays, and she should also exercise regularly. She can no longer have sex. I will write down what I need to pay attention to specifically. Sent to the princess's residence. During this period, I will take some of her blood for testing at any time." Princess Yi Yang's face is getting paler. Although she doesn't need to take her blood now, she can't eat meat or have sex, and she still has to have her blood taken at any time. Does she still have any freedom at all? Emperor Chen nodded, looked at concubine Tang Hui behind him, and said, "Assign 2 more female officials to take care of her at Yi Yang's house." Concubine Tang Hui understood what Emperor Chen meant, nodded, and said, "I obey the decree." Tang Ning looked at Huang Chen again and said, "The Queen Mother must pay more attention to her life, especially her diet. She must strengthen control and exercise appropriately. I will write a detailed note and submit it to your Majesty." Of course, he was talking nonsense about the blood transfusion therapy. Just to scare Princess Yi Yang, Emperor Chen sent 2 female officials to the princess's mansion to monitor her. Presumably, her personality would be restrained, and she would be able to eliminate harm for the people of the capital. As for controlling diabetes, he did know 2 folk remedies, but he did not dare to abuse them on the Queen Mother. As long as she paid attention to diet and exercise, she could actually control it well. The Queen Mother stood up, walked forward, looked at Tang Ning, and asked Chen Huang, "Is this the Tang Ning that your Majesty often mentions?" Chen Huang nodded and said, "That's him." Sure enough, she looks very talented and can be called a young and handsome person. The Queen Mother looked kind-hearted. Perhaps because of her long illness, her body was a little thin, but she still had an inexplicable temperament about her. Even though she was standing there casually, others would not regard her as an ordinary old woman. Tang Ning cupped her hands and said politely, "The Queen Mother is so complimentary." "You don't have to be humble." The Queen Mother looked at him and said, "Your Majesty seldom praises people, and his vision is not wrong. Whenever Chen Huang had any trouble or difficulty, he would be asked to do it. It was also appropriate to give him a few compliments. Today is the Queen Mother's birthday after all. After Tang Ning corrected the Imperial Medical Office's misunderstanding of the Queen Mother's condition, the birthday banquet quickly returned to the main topic. Emperor Chen looked at Prince Kong and suddenly said, "I heard that you prepared a rare gift for the Queen Mother." Prince Kong nodded, glanced at Prince Duan, and said, "The gift from Emperor Duan Prince seems to be unusual this time. Why don't you let the younger brother bring it out first, and then I'll make a fool of myself." King Duan looked at him and said, "The elders and the younger are in order, so it is better for brother Kong Wang to present the gift first." Tang Ning left the two of them alone. Prince Kong and Prince Duan never missed any opportunity to fight, even the Queen Mother's birthday banquet was no exception. People often say throwing bricks to attract jade, and expensive things are usually used as a finale. Neither of them wanted to admit that their gifts were bricks and not jade. At this moment, King Huai looked at the two of them, took the initiative to step forward and said, "Since the two royal brothers are not willing to offer gifts first, then I will show my shame first." He took out a brocade box, took out the contents of the brocade box, and said, "My grandson wishes the imperial grandmother happiness, longevity, and health." What King Huai took out was a jade Buddha. It was exquisitely crafted and lifelike in its carvings. It was expensive at first glance. The Queen Mother believed in Buddhism. Zhao Man originally wanted to give a Buddha statue or something, but thought that many people might think of giving a Buddha statue and it would not be good to repeat it to others, so she gave up the idea. Well, the Queen Mother was obviously very satisfied with this gift and even said two good words about it. King Kong and King Duan looked at the jade Buddha that King Huai took out. Their expressions were startled at first, and then their faces darkened. Emperor Chen looked at them and said, "You two, stop fighting. King Kong is older, you come first." King Kong looked a little embarrassed and took out a glass Buddha statue from the brocade box. After taking a look, Prince Duan was stunned. Emperor Chen looked at him and asked in surprise, "Is it also a Buddha statue?" King Kong said, "This Buddha statue was obtained by my grandson from a merchant from a foreign country. There is only one in the world and it is very rare." The Queen Mother smiled and said, "It would be nice to make a pair." King Huai took out a jade Buddha statue, which was deeply loved by the Queen Mother. Although the Buddha statue of King Kong was more valuable and rare than the one he gave, it was nothing new. After King Kong gave the gift and said his congratulatory speech, Prince Duan walked forward with an even more embarrassed expression and took out a glass Buddha statue exactly the same as the one King Kong gave, saying, "My grandson wishes my grandmother a long life." While he was saying his congratulatory speech, he had already scolded the merchant from a foreign country in his heart, and even greeted his ancestors for 18 generations. They said that this thing is unique and there is only one in the world. If there is only one, where did the one that King Kong got? Although King Kong was cursing the foreign merchant in his heart, he was secretly glad that he was not behind Prince Duan. "Shifei, what did you say you would give me?" The Queen Mother turned to look at Shifei, dispelling the awkward atmosphere, and Prince Duan immediately retreated. This time, all three of them presented Buddha statues. Prince Huai was the first to present a gift, which took a great advantage. Prince Duan and Prince Kong made a fool of themselves in front of everyone, especially Prince Duan. If it weren't for the Queen Mother's rescue, he would not even be able to get off the stage. After the three princes, it was the concubines who presented gifts to the Queen Mother for her birthday, and then the princesses. The gifts given by everyone were not outstanding. The Queen Mother finally looked at Zhao Man and asked with a smile, "Manner said 2 days ago that she would give me a surprise. What is the surprise?" Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 543. Zhao Man looked at the Queen Mother and said with a smile, "We need to see this gift outside." You have always liked to keep people in suspense since you were young. The Queen Mother smiled, looked at Emperor Chen, and said, "It's almost time, let's all go out together, just in time to see what gift this girl wants to give me." Emperor Chen nodded, and the princes and princesses in the palace, and the concubines in the harem followed him and the Queen Mother and walked out of the palace together. The Queen Mother looked at Zhao Man and asked with a smile, "Can we take it out now?" Zhao Man nodded, took out a bamboo tube from her arms, lit a fuse that came out of the bamboo tube with a fire stick, and then pointed the bamboo tube to the sky. Swoosh! A beam of fire shot out from the bamboo tube and exploded in the sky. Everyone was a little surprised, wondering what she was doing. After a bit of cold wind outside, Princess Yi Yang finally came back to her senses from her trance. She glanced at Zhao Man and said sarcastically, "Is it possible that the birthday gift you gave to the Queen Mother was just a firecracker?" As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly noticed that something seemed to light up in front of her. When she looked up at the night sky in front of her, she found that it was the night sky that was lit up. Zhao Man's firework seemed to have released a signal. After the first explosion, a series of flames shot straight into the night sky from a distance and exploded at a high altitude, just in the direction they were facing. When the firework exploded, a large Shao character was clearly visible in the sky. Although it dissipated quickly, a new one would appear soon. The fireworks were dense and continuous, and the momentum was even greater than yesterday. In the garden, the guests who participated in the Queen Mother's birthday banquet raised their heads and looked at the sky. The people in Beijing also hurried from their rooms to the yard to watch this rare scene. Looking at the word longevity spelled out by the fireworks, Princess Yi Yang's expression froze and she could no longer speak. Everyone looked up at the fireworks, while Zhao Man tilted her head to look at Tang Ning beside her. The fireworks in the distance illuminated her face and reflected the sweetness and happiness in her eyes. "Manner, your gift." The Queen Mother lowered her head and looked at her with a smile, but she saw her eyes looking elsewhere, her tone paused slightly, and the two words she said were also covered by the noisy explosion. She looked at the smile on Zhao Man's face and followed her gaze. Tang Ning's eyes only stayed in the sky for a moment, and then retracted. He had seen this scene too many times, and he had also seen more beautiful and grander fireworks than this. Emperor Chen wanted to make the Queen Mother's birthday banquet lively, and the best gift was to do what he wanted. This gift was very lively, and the people of the capital could be shocked. The form was also unique and would not fall into clichés. The font in the sky was actually made using the simplest method. Fireworks that would not explode into pieces were selected, and they were placed on the ground in the shape of the word Shao in advance. Then, they were ignited at the same time to form this scene. Of course, even this simple operation was figured out after countless experiments. He actually spent less time on the fireworks today than yesterday, but the number of fireworks was twice as much as yesterday, enough to set off for a quarter of an hour. At a certain moment, as if realizing something, he turned his head and looked at Zhao Man, who was grinning at him. He smiled back at her, and Zhao Man immediately looked away. Tang Ning retracted his gaze, but still felt a little strange in his heart. He looked in a certain direction with a feeling in his heart, and saw that the Queen Mother's eyes were actually on him. The Queen Mother smiled at him slightly, and then looked at the fireworks in the sky again. After the night sky was bright for a long time, it finally returned to darkness. Emperor Chen looked at Zhao Man and said, "Manner prepared this gift with great care. Things are precious because they are rare." The Queen Mother received more than 5 Buddha statues on her birthday today. This unique gift can give people a bright feeling. Zhao Man smiled and said, "As long as the Queen Mother likes it." "I like it." The Queen Mother smiled and said, "I like the gift Manner gave tonight the most." Hearing the Queen Mother's words, the princes, princesses, and concubines behind her all showed embarrassment on their faces. No matter how expensive the gifts they gave, they could not please the Queen Mother with this special gift. After watching a fireworks display, Today's Queen Mother's birthday banquet officially began. The birthday banquet was separated for men and women. The female family members were hosted by the concubines in the harem, but the princesses accompanied Emperor Chen and the Queen Mother to the court officials and dignitaries. Tang Ning and Xiaoju shared a table. Before the birthday banquet began, the eunuchs and palace maids had already placed food on the table, but they could not enjoy it immediately. Similar to the birthdays of the king and the Queen Mother, there are regulations and they need to be followed one by one. After going through all the procedures and announcing that they could start, Wei Jian came around from the back, walked to Tang Ning, and said, "Sir Tang, His Majesty asked you to go over." Tang Ning put back a piece of dessert that he had picked up, asked Xiaoju to leave a few pieces for him, and then followed Wei Jian. He walked to the front, bowed to Emperor Chen, and said, "I wonder what His Majesty wants me to do when he summoned me here." Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, "You just said that the Queen Mother's illness focuses on diet." Tang Ning nodded and said, "If you can pay attention to diet, the Queen Mother's illness can be well controlled." Emperor Chen pointed to the food on the table and said, "Then take a look at these foods, which ones can't be eaten by the Queen Mother?" Tang Ning looked at the food on the table and said, "You can't drink any more sweet soup. It's best not to eat any more desserts. You can eat more vegetables." The Queen Mother had a look of regret on her face and said, "Can't you eat even sweet things?" Emperor Chen looked at her and said, "The Queen's health is in serious condition, so it's better to listen to the doctor's advice." The Queen Mother smiled and said, "Then I won't eat." Immediately, a palace maid took away the food that Tang Ning had just picked out. Tang Ning screened it again before saying, "That's it? If there's nothing else, I'll leave." Emperor Chen nodded and said, "You can go down and eat too." Just as Tang Ning was about to turn around and leave, the Queen Mother looked at Emperor Chen and said, "There will be many dishes to be served soon. We can't just call him over to ask after the last one." She looked at Tang Ning, pointed to Zhao Man's seat nearby, and said, "Yi Yang is not feeling well and will go back first. There is a vacant seat at Manu's place. You can go and sit there." Tang Ning was stunned for a moment, then said, "That's where the prince and princess belong. It wasn't appropriate for me to go there. This is the decree of the AI family." The Queen Mother looked at him and said, "You are not annoyed by the people walking here and there, but the AI family is still annoyed." Tang Ning looked at Huang Chen, who said, "Since it is the Queen Mother's wish, you can sit there." "I obey your order." Tang Ning nodded, turned around and walked over, and sat next to Zhao Man with a dull look in her eyes. When Tang Ning stood up and left the table, she already attracted the attention of many people when she walked to the front. They were too far away, so they couldn't hear what he said to Her Majesty and the Queen Mother. They only saw that there seemed to be a lot of commotion here, with food being added and food being removed. When Tang Ning and Pingyang Princess Zhao Man sat together, everyone was even more confused and completely confused about the situation. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 544. At a table somewhere in the palace, an official looked forward and murmured, "Your Majesty's favor towards Mr. Xiao Tang has reached such an extent. That is a seat that only the royal family can sit in." The colleague next to him took a sip of wine and said, "If you were as capable as Mr. Tang, His Majesty would love you so much." The official shook his head and said, "Of course this is impossible. I just need to do my job well. How can I be as proficient in everything as Mr. Tang?" He looked forward and couldn't help but say, "Not to mention, Mr. Xiao Tang and the princess are sitting together, they seem to be a good match." "It's a perfect match." Another person nodded and said, "One is a savior and the other is a broom star. It's a perfect match. If they get together, who can defeat whom?" I think Mr. Tang is even more powerful. He has been to so many yamen and has never met a single opponent. The princess is not a vegetarian. She defeated the eldest young master of the Tang family and even the crown prince of the Chu kingdom. I still think the princess is better. The two gossiped quietly, each holding their own opinions, but they only treated it as a joke. After all, even if Tang Ning was favored by the Holy Family, she already had 3 wives and concubines, so there was no way she could be with the princess. It is impossible for the royal family to watch something like this happen. Even if His Majesty dies, the new emperor will not agree. If the new emperor agrees, the clan will not agree. If the two of them want to be together openly, they will have to die unless the state of Chen is destroyed. One of them looked at the two people who were sitting next to each other. They seemed to be a perfect match, like a golden boy and a beautiful girl. He sighed leisurely, what a pity. In front of a table at the front, Tang Ning put a piece of cake between her hands. She looked at Zhao Man who was sitting up straight, clutching her skirt tightly with her hands underneath. She whispered, "You don't have to be so nervous. Just be more natural. You're too nervous otherwise, others will doubt." Zhao Man also picked up a piece of pastry and asked in a very low voice, "Can Grandma Huang see something? Do you think she has a sharp eye?" Tang Ning picked up the wine glass, offered her a glass of wine with a smile, and whispered, "Don't worry, let's eat food." In order not to affect her, Tang Ning simply stopped talking to her. She turned to the side and saw that the person sitting next to him was King Huai. Although the gift given by King Huai tonight was not that outstanding, compared with King Kong and King Duan, it was not so embarrassing. At this time, he was leisurely eating the food, wine, and pastries on the table. He took a sip of wine, turned to look at Tang Ning, and asked, "Is there something on my face? Why does Mr. Tang keep looking at me?" "No, Your Highness must have seen it wrong." Tang Ning picked up the wine glass and looked away as if nothing had happened. King Huai did not continue to ask, but he did not shut up. Instead, he looked at him and asked with a little curiosity, "I am very curious. Is the blood transfusion method that Master Tang just mentioned really useful for the Queen Mother's condition, effective?" Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Does Your Highness suspect that Tang Ning is deceiving the Emperor?" "Of course not." King Huai shook his head and said, "I am just curious about these unheard of magic arts. I have heard before that there is a kind of goo insect that can suck the blood from a person's body and transfer it to another person. But it's similar to what Mr. Tang said about blood exchange." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Your Highness also knows about goo insects?" King Huai nodded and said, "It is rumored that in Nanzhao, there is a reclusive clan, hiding in the mountains, who know the magic of cultivating voodoo. It is also said that the Liang people are good at voodoo. However, the trace of the reclusive clan is difficult to find, and the Liang kingdom is destroyed later. This goo technique was lost inexplicably, and I have only read about it in some classics." What Prince Huai knew was beyond Tang Ning's expectations. He once learned in detail from the old beggar that the Liang people's statement that they were good at voodoo was actually biased. Those who were truly good at voodoo belonged to a certain sect in the Liang kingdom. This sect was called the Wangu sect, which was based on clan. It was once the state religion of the Liang kingdom, and many of its members worked for the Liang kingdom, so it was said that Liang people were good at voodoo. But in fact, the voodoo skills of Wangu sect are not spread to foreigners, and in Liang state, there are not many people who really understand the voodoo skills. Gong Sunying and Su Mei's master Bai Jin must be from the Wangu sect. After listening to the old beggar's explanation, Tang Ning thought he was a member of the Gu tribe, but he denied it. According to what he said, when he was young, he was interested in the art of Gu for a while, so he went to teach the 10,000 Gus. Come back after learning. The old beggar said it in an understatement, but the actual situation was definitely not as simple as he said. Later, Tang Ning overheard from Su Mei that their 10,000 Gu sect had two rules that every disciple must remember when joining the sect. The first rule is that the voodoo technique cannot be passed on to outsiders, and those who violate it will suffer the pain of being devoured by thousands of voodoos. Su Mei is not a member of the Gu clan. Strictly speaking, her master Bai Jin has disobeyed the order. However, it is not known whether the Wan Gu sect still exists, so naturally no one will pursue her on this issue. The second rule is very interesting. Disciples of Wan Gu cult are not allowed to give alms to beggars, not even a grain of rice or a copper coin. It can be seen from this canon that some beggar may have done something unforgivable to their Wan Gu sect, which made the leader of that generation hesitate to write this article into the canon. King Huai looked at Tang Ning and asked, "Does Master Tang also know about Gu?" Tang Ning nodded slightly and said, "I know a little bit, but this method of blood transfusion is different from Gu. If a person's body loses too much blood, his life will be in danger. As long as he finds a suitable blood source to replenish his life, he can save his life." King Huai nodded and said, "Any magic like this has many restrictions. Otherwise, how could Yi Yang be the only one who meets the requirements in the royal family? If I didn't trust Lord Tang, I would have thought that you and Yi Yang had some grudges." "Your Highness, that's wrong." Tang Ning shook his head and said, "Even if Princess Yi Yang and I have some grudges, I won't take revenge on her through this matter. I'm not such a petty person." King Huai glanced at him and asked, "But why did I hear that Lord Tang actually likes to haggle over small matters and always complain when he has a grudge? Also, a petty person who will take revenge for any grudges." "Who said that?" Tang Ning put down his wine glass heavily and said, "Slandering an official of the court is a crime. Please tell me who said that this matter cannot be let go." King Huai looked at him and asked, "Didn't Lord Tang just say that he would not be petty?" Tang Ning said in a deep voice, "This is not petty, this is a matter of principle." Although this time the Queen Mother's birthday banquet had some troubles for no reason, and he became the Queen Mother's chief nutritionist and fitness coach, but there were also some gains. If he hadn't come tonight, he wouldn't have known that Princess Yi Yang would bully Zhao Man like this. If she behaved well in the future, it would be fine. If she didn't behave well, he would bleed her every few days, let her rest at home and replenish her blood, and don't come out to harm people again. After the banquet, he left the hall and found a remote place to wait for Xiaoi and the others to come out. A figure walked out of the darkness, looked at him, and said, "Please tell Bai Jin a message for me." Tang Ning was startled, turned to look at Gong Sun Ying, and said angrily, "You are sick, hiding in a place like this in the middle of the night. If you have anything to say, go and tell her yourself." Gong Sun Ying glanced at him and said, "If I can leave, why would I look for you?" Tang Ning calmed down his heartbeat, and said unhappily, "She went to Jiangnan, I can't tell her this." "What?" Gong Sun Ying's face changed drastically when she heard it, and asked, "She went to Jiangnan?" Tang Ning looked at her and said in surprise, "She went to Jiangnan, not to die. What are you worried about?" Gong Sun Ying did not answer him, and left with a gloomy face. Tang Ning stood in the yard, watching her leave, with a thoughtful expression. Gong Sun Ying's expression just now was more of shock, obviously not worried about Bai Jin, but seemed to be worried about herself, which meant that she didn't want Bai Jin to go to Jiangnan. What was the trick in this? He couldn't figure it out for a while. He looked up again, and Gong Sun Ying had disappeared. At the entrance of the palace, Zhong Yi and Tang Yaoyao walked out. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 545. P.S. I went back to my hometown today to celebrate the new year. There are a lot of things to do, so the update is late. I will continue writing after dinner, and the second update will be later. Tang Ning took a break today and planned to take Xiaoi and the others to the mountains to see the peach blossoms. It was now April, and the peach blossoms in the capital had long faded, but the ones on the mountain behind Zhou Xiaoi were still blooming brilliantly, and they should still be in bloom for the last few days. In fact, the peach blossoms on the shore of Tianrunju Lake are also very beautiful. However, in the more than a month since Su Mei left the capital, Tang Ning has not been to Tianrunju several times. At this time, more than a month has passed since the Queen Mother's birthday. The Imperial Medical Office misdiagnosed the Queen Mother's disease, used the wrong medicine, and failed to pay attention to the precautions for diabetes. As a result, the Queen Mother's health was deteriorating day by day. After Tang Ning corrected it, she made strict changes to her daily diet. The control, supplemented by a certain amount of exercise, has an immediate effect. In the past month, her physical symptoms have been greatly relieved. The Empress Dowager's health improved, and Emperor Chen Longjian was very happy. He rewarded her with many good things yesterday, which were enough to fill several carriages. In addition, Wei Jian also brought an imperial edict to transfer him to take up a post in the Ministry of Civil Affairs. This time, his position was no longer the head of the Ministry of Justice or the doctor in the Ministry of War, but the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Of course, there are already 2 ministers in the Ministry of Personnel. His position as minister is temporary, but even if it is temporary, it is still a 4th-rank position. Zhou Xiaoyi Zhonglang is a 4th-grade general, but this is a military position, and his civilian position is only from a 5th grade. I don't know if Emperor Chen did not intend it, or if he intended to reward him for relieving the Queen Mother's illness. He directly inherited the military general grade, so that he achieved the same triple jump as his father-in-law. In this way, even after he left the civil service department, he was still a serious 4th-grade civil servant. After passing through the 6 departments, he went from the 6th grade to the 4th grade. Looking at it, there was only one person in the imperial court who could be promoted as fast as him. That is his father-in-law Zhong Mingli. Frankly speaking, Emperor Chen was extremely kind to him and his family. This was an honor that had never been achieved by anyone in the current dynasty. Even though Tang Ning couldn't stand many of his actions, she had to admit it. As long as he could show his usefulness to the court and the country, Emperor Chen would never be stingy with rewards or favors. He just resigned from the Ministry of War yesterday and is in no hurry to go to the Ministry of Personnel. As a rule, you have to take a few days off before officially taking up your post. Zhouxiaoyi Back Mountain is actually an unnamed short mountain. The altitude is not high, only a few hundred meters, but the scenery on the mountain is good. Tang Ning also accidentally discovered this peach blossom forest, which is a good place for an outing in spring. Under the peach tree was soft grass. Tang Ning spread a large piece of white cloth on it and spread various candied desserts. Xiao Yi and Xiao Ru went to pick peach blossoms to make peach blossom cakes. Xiao Xiao and Fang Xinyu sat next to Tang Ning. Listen to his story. It is said that there was a scholar in the Tang dynasty named Kui Hu. He was born in a scholarly family. He was very talented. When he was traveling, he accidentally discovered a peach blossom forest. Tang Ning was telling the story of Kui Hu. When he came to the peach blossom forest today, he couldn't help but think of Kui Hu's title Nanshuang, the capital city, the sentence "the human face does not know where to go, the peach blossoms still laugh at the spring breeze," and Kui Hu's paragraph "a beautiful and sad love story." Women, especially young girls, are very emotional. When Tang Ning mentioned that Kui Hu came to visit her again the next year, the girl had already become ill and died of depression due to longing for her. Kui Hu was so heartbroken that he could only leave a poem on the wall. By then, Xiao Xiao and Fang Xinyu could no longer stop crying. Seeing their appearance, Tang Ning couldn't help but remember that when he first read this poem, he had been sad for a long time. Tragedies are often more engraved in people's memories than comedies. There are poems to prove this story. Tang Ning sighed leisurely and said, "On this day last year, in this door, the human faces and peach blossoms reflected each other's red color. Where did the human faces go? The peach blossoms still smiled at the spring breeze. Fang Xinyu wiped her tears and said, "How can this be possible? Shouldn't a talented man and a beautiful woman be together in the end?" Fang Xiaoyu is still too young, and she still doesn't understand that there are more imperfections and regrets in this world than perfection and perfection. Fang Xiaoyu didn't understand this, and neither did Tang Yaoyao. She walked over from the front, looked at Tang Ning, glared at him, and asked, "Did you bully Xiao Xiao and Xiaoyu?" Tang Ning looked innocent and said, "No, I just told them a story." Tang Yaoyao put her hands on her hips and said, "You just told a story, will they cry? Tell me what story it is." Tang Yaoyao didn't understand herself. The extremely beautiful, strong, and brave long-legged heroine was just her own definition. In fact, her heart was sensitive and fragile, even worse than Xiao Xiao. Tang Ning shrugged and said nonchalantly, "If you are willing to listen, I will tell you again." After a while, Tang Ning looked at Tang Yaoyao with tears in her eyes and asked, "Are you crying?" Tang Yaoyao wiped the corners of her eyes, glared at him, and said, "I didn't." Tang Ning glanced at her mouth and said, "You obviously have it." Tang Yaoyao looked at him and asked, "Is this a story you made up? I have never heard of the name Kuihu or this poem." Tang Ning glanced at her and said, "That's because you have little knowledge. You have only memorized a few poems and know a few poets. Do you know who Li Bai is? Do you think I haven't read a book?" Tang Yaoyao glared at him and said, "Li Bai, also known as Taibei, also known as Qinglian Zheshi, is a very famous poet in the Tang dynasty, the private school my father hired for me when I was a child. That's how I was taught." "Not bad." Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "Where's Du Fu? Have you heard of Du Fu?" Tang Yaoyao glanced at him and said, "Two orioles are crowing in the green willows, and a row of egrets are flying in the sky. Do you think I haven't memorized his poems?" Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "Where is Rong Xiao Rong?" Tang Yaoyao thought for a while, but she still didn't expect to hear this name there, but she couldn't reveal it in front of Tang Ning. She said disdainfully, "Of course I have, he was a poet from that era. I think he wrote poems. I've memorized it before, but I've forgotten it now." Tang Ning glanced at her, not daring to expose her. Rong Xiaorong was just the name of an online writer he liked very much before. How could Tang Yaojiao know that she was just pretending to be fat? Tang Yaoyao was worried that Tang Ning would ask again, so she glared at him and said, "I'm going to ask Xiao Yi. If there is Kuihu, she will definitely know." After a while, Zhong Yi walked over with her and asked in surprise, "I have never heard of the name Kuihu, nor have I heard of this poem." Thinking of the 150 years that the Tang dynasty was short, Tang Ning explained casually, "There were so many poets in the Tang dynasty, so it's normal that you haven't heard of them." Zhong Yi shook his head and said, "But this poem is so well written, how could it remain unknown for hundreds of years?" Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "Maybe, you just haven't seen it. I haven't even heard of Xiaoi, you must have made it up." Tang Yaoyao glared at him and said, "If you change the ending for me, how could Zhang Niang die?" "Xiao Xiao, Xiaoyu, don't you think so?" Xiao Xiao and Fang Xinyu nodded like chickens pecking at rice, deeply agreeing with Tang Yaoyao's words. "If you don't change it," Tang Ning shook her head firmly and said, "if it is changed, this story will be meaningless." Tang Yaoyao looked at him and asked, "Really you won't change? To not fix?" Tang Ning shook his head. This was a matter of principle. Principles cannot be changed or surrendered unless Tang Yaoyao rides on him to force him to surrender. After a while, Su Ru picked peach blossoms and looked at Tang Yaoyao, who was jumping up and down in the peach forest, chasing Tang Ning. She smiled and said, "It's been so long, Yaoyao and brother Xiao Ning are still like this, when will they stop making trouble like this?" Zhong Yi looked forward, with some indescribable meaning in his eyes, and said softly, "They may continue to make trouble like this for the rest of their lives." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 546. Kui Hu was heartbroken. He hugged Zhang Niang's body and shouted hoarsely, "Zhang Niang, take a step slowly, Kui Hu will follow you." Kui Hu shook Zhang Niang and cried loudly. Tears flowed down Zhang Niang's face, and at this moment, Zhang Niang unexpectedly woke up slowly. Although Tang Ning's Qinggong was good, it was still not as good as Tang Yao Yao. When he was caught by Tang Yao Yao and pushed down under a peach tree, Kui Hu's tragic love story took a turn. Tang Yao Yao sat on his waist and asked, "What next?" Tang Ning said, "Then Kui Hu and Zhang Niang got married, and they lived a life without shame from then on." Tang Yao Yao said angrily, "Tell me about a life without shame." Tang Ning said helplessly, "They are both married. What is a life without shame? Isn't that what a married life is all about? Except for the fake couple, which other couple was not like this? He and Tang Yao Yao were the only ones who had been married for more than a month. Although they slept together many times, there was still one last step that they had not taken. Many steps before the last step were not taken. Therefore, Tang Ning didn't like sleeping with her very much. The long nights were a great torture for him. Tang Yao Yao said firmly, "Anyway, if you change the word, you can't use no shame nor shame." Okay. He had to lower his head under her buttocks. Tang Ning thought for a moment and said, "After the two got married, Zhang Niang was diligent in running the house, filial to her parents-in-law, and harmonious to her relatives and neighbors. The red sleeves at night added fragrance to her family. With her husband accompanying her to study, Kui Hu was focused on his homework and became more and more diligent in his studies. Later, Kui Hu went to Beijing to take the exam, was awarded the title of Jinchi, and was promoted to an official. With the help of Zhang Niang, he became an upright official. Has outstanding political achievements and is deeply loved by the people. The couple is also in harmony and grows old together." Tang Ning finally succumbed to Tang Yao Yao's lustful power and played out another version of the ending of Peach Blossom Love. Tang Yao Yao let him go, patted the grass clippings on her skirt, and walked back. Women are just weird. They obviously mean the same thing, but they have to explain it in another way. Tang Ning followed her and said casually, "Actually, it's not just Kui Hu and Tao Hua who are related. You and Tao Hua are also very destined." Tang Yao Yao turned around and asked, "Why?" Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "Do you know the origin of your name?" Tang Yao Yao thought for a while and said, "I seem to have heard my father say, which sentence in the book of songs does it come from?" "The peach blossoms shine brightly," Tang Ning explained, "the peach blossoms are described as gorgeous and lush." Tang Yao Yao said unhappily, "The word Yao is not good. Yao Yao means premature death, and indeed few people would use it as a name. However, when the rich man of the Tang dynasty named her Yao Yao, he naturally took the meaning from the book of songs. People who have not read the book may not understand this meaning." Tang Ning looked at her and consoled her, "Actually, the name doesn't mean anything." "What does Jing mean?" "The brilliance of jade." Tang Jing has lost its brilliance, and the former Minister of Household Affairs, Han Ming, does he understand? "My name is Tang Ning, I can't have peace either." A name is just a code name. A good name does not necessarily mean a good destiny. Although his name has the word Ning in it, isn't it true that he is often chased by Tang Yao Yao and has no peace? Some people even think that the meaner the name, the tougher the destiny. Even the Prince of Hell would not accept naming a child Gaodan Zuhua. Tang Yao Yao looked at him and asked, "Why can't you live in peace?" Tang Ning waved her hand, "This is not important." He walked quickly to Xiao Ru and Xiao Yi and helped them pick peach blossoms. After picking for a while, he heard footsteps coming from the front. Tang Ning looked forward, thinking that someone with the same elegance as them was coming here for an outing. When they walked in, she discovered that they were several men who looked like guards and were carrying weapons. Those people didn't seem to expect that there would be anyone here. The leader frowned, walked over quickly, and said loudly, Who are you? Get out of here quickly. Tang Yaoyao frowned and asked, Who are you? The guard said, This peach forest belongs to us. Please leave immediately, otherwise we will be rude. After all, she had fallen into someone else's love grove, so she had to deal with the consequences first. Tang Ning walked over, looked at Tang Yaoyao, and said, Let's go. He left a piece of silver and said to the guard, I picked some peach blossoms, and these will be considered as compensation. Seeing that he had a good attitude, the guard softened his expression and said, My master will be here soon. She has a bad temper. You should leave as soon as possible. If she sees it, you will be in trouble. Although Tang Ning didn't like trouble, she was least afraid of trouble. In this capital, even the most troublesome Princess Yi Yang became much more honest after he bled her twice. Normally, others were afraid that he would cause trouble. After he packed up his things and walked out of the Dalan with them, he happened to bump into a group of people walking towards them. Looking at the person at the front, Tang Ning was startled, stopped, cupped her hands and said, I have met Princess Yi Yang. Although Princess Yi Yang had been bled twice on his hands, and he had seen her scream like a pig being killed, she was a princess after all, and she had to have the proper etiquette. Just like he and Zhao Man, they had hugged and kissed, but they still had to be polite in front of outsiders. Princess Yi Yang looked at him, her already pale face turned paler. She looked at him in horror and said in a trembling voice, Why are you here? Tang Ning said, No. Princess Yi Yang's face turned even paler, and she shrieked, Not today, I feel dizzy, I'm not feeling well, I'll leave right away. Ignoring the maids and guards around her, she turned around hastily and walked down the mountain quickly. A maid caught up with her and asked in confusion, Princess, this peach forest. Princess Yi Yang waved her hand and said, No more. Tang Ning's hand was suspended in the air, and the atmosphere seemed a little awkward. In fact, he just wanted to say that he accidentally found a peach forest and came in to pick a few peach blossoms. He hoped that she would not blame him. What did she think he was going to do, let her bleed? He had let her go twice in a month. The last time was the day before yesterday. If he let her go again, her body couldn't bear it. Besides, he wasn't such a heartless person. Since Princess Yi Yang had left, they simply went in and picked more peach blossoms. Anyway, the silver ingot was enough to buy all the peach blossoms in the forest. The more they picked, the less loss they would suffer. I heard that peach blossoms are very good for making cakes. With the fragrance, he could eat as many as he wanted. Too beautiful promises are always made because they are too young. Tang Ning regretted picking so many peach blossoms a few days ago in order to save a little loss. They seemed to be testing how many kinds of food could be made with peach blossoms. These days, Tang Ning had only eaten some peach blossom cakes and peach blossom soup. He was extremely suspicious that he had dreamed about peach blossoms for 2 consecutive nights because he had eaten too many peach blossoms in the past 2 days. In order to save himself from peach blossoms, Tang Ning reported to the Ministry of Personnel 2 days in advance. The Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Revenue are the 2 most important departments among the 6 ministries. One is in charge of power, and the other is in charge of money. With power, it is easy to get money, so a considerable number of officials in the court want to work in the Ministry of Personnel. Minister Zhou of the Ministry of Personnel has been ill recently, and the 2 assistant ministers are in charge of the government. The 2 assistant ministers of the Ministry of Personnel are Fang Hong, the left assistant minister, and Sun Qian, the right assistant minister. Sun Qian is the former Jing Zhaoyin. In the last competition for assistant ministers, he won by doing nothing and succeeded in taking the position. As for Fang Hong, Tang Ning is already very familiar with him. He has been in the Ministry of Personnel for many years, and is the most powerful one in the Ministry of Personnel besides Assistant Minister Zhou. Assistant Minister Zhou is not young anymore, and his health is getting worse. Judging from the current situation, he is likely to be promoted from the second in command to the first in command within 1 or 2 years. The Ministry of Personnel is busy with affairs, and the 2 assistant ministers are not here today. After Tang Ning came to his duty room, he first asked someone to bring the resumes of officials above the 6th rank in the Ministry of Personnel. The Ministry of Personnel is not like other powerless yamen suitable for retirement. There may be lackeys of the Tang family and Prince Duan among them. He has to take on the responsibility of the Minister of Personnel and get rid of these bad apples as soon as possible. How to distinguish these people? Call them one by one. Those who treat him badly are likely to be people from Prince Duan and the Tang family. While Tang Ning was flipping through his resume in the duty room, a piece of news was also spread in the Ministry of Personnel. The new minister Tang was extremely conscientious in his duties. On the first day, he started by getting familiar with his subordinates, and called everyone in to ask about them with concern. They have been officials for many years, but have never seen a boss who cares so much about his subordinates. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 547. There are 4 divisions under the Ministry of Personnel, namely, the Ministry of Personnel, the Division of Feng, the Division of Honors, and the Division of Caogong. Together, these 4 departments are responsible for the appointment and removal, examination, promotion, transfer, and other affairs of civil servants all over the world. Because the Ministry of Personnel is in the capital, it is in charge of officials all over the country. Therefore, the officials of the Ministry of Personnel are not idle, and they are on business trips one after another. It was commonplace for a few months. At this time, it is a new year of the imperial examination. In previous years, the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Personnel were the key selection areas for imperial examination examiners. This year is naturally no exception. In addition, Chen Guo's biannual official assessment is about to come, and people who need to be sent out are needed. Quite a few. The official department was obviously short of manpower. It was at this time that Tang Ning was recruited by Emperor Chen to be a young man. Zhou Shangshu was ill, and Fang Hong and Sun Qian were away from the yamen. All the affairs of the Ministry of Personnel were temporarily left to Tang Ning to handle. He first got acquainted with all the senior officials in the Ministry of Civil Affairs, and found nothing fishy on the surface. As subordinates, they all treated him respectfully without any abnormalities, especially Dr. Feng, who was extremely enthusiastic towards him. Even the enthusiastic Tang Ning was not used to it. However, this does not mean that there are no people from the Tang family in the staff department. If it were him, he would not show off to his superiors on the first day. An official came in, handed him a folder, and said, "Shilang Tang, this is the list of officials assigned to the Ministry of Civil Affairs for assessment this time. Please take a look at it. If there are no problems, you can submit it." This official is the doctor of the Ministry of Personnel. As the head of the 4 divisions of the Ministry of Personnel, the official has the most respected position. After completing the qualifications of the doctor, becoming the minister is just around the corner. The list of expatriate officials was nothing more than who was responsible for which provinces and regions. There was nothing interesting to see when they came to evaluate local officials. After Tang Ning glanced at it, she handed it to him and said, "Then pass it up like this." After taking it, the doctor of the Ministry of Personnel put it down and said, "This list was decided by Mr. Zhou before. Mr. Fang was originally in charge of Jiangnan Road, but now Mr. Fang is going to Jingdong Road to take the exam, and there is no time. Tang is needed. The minister appoints another person." Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "If the doctor is idle, then let him go. Jiangnan Road should be the richest place in the entire Chen kingdom. There is no intrusion from foreign enemies, sufficient food, and the people live in peace. A considerable part of the Chen kingdom's taxes every year is collected from the two Jiangnan roads. Even Tang Zhao knew to go to Jiangnan to hide when he got into trouble, which is enough to prove that it is really a good place. For an errand in a place like this, even if you don't have to be a minister, you must at least be a minister. The doctor of the Ministry of Personnel nodded and said, "Then I will fill in the name of Dr. Zhang. If you are not a household manager, you will never know how expensive firewood and rice are. If you are not a leader, you will never know how many chores there are in the yamen." Tang Ning has been in charge of the staff department for the past 2 days, and has been busy with various chores, so that he never went home on time from the office. Today, after a long wait at the lower office, no one came in. It seemed like nothing happened. Tang Ning tidied up her clothes and walked out of the duty room, where she happened to bump into the doctor from the staff department. The doctor from the Ministry of Officials took a step back, bowed and said, "Master Tang." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Is something wrong?" The official doctor nodded and said, "Something's wrong." Tang Ning waited to go back to eat and said, "If it's not urgent, we can talk about it tomorrow." The official doctor said helplessly, "It's quite urgent." After a while, Tang Ning sat back on the chair. The doctor from the official department stood beside him and said, "Mr. Zhang from the examination department was injured. The injury is not serious. The doctor said that he needs to rest for at least a month." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "It is necessary to ask for leave due to injury. I'm sure he will take leave. He will come back when he recovers from his injury." The doctor from the Ministry of Personnel shook his head and said, "What I mean is that the Ministry of Official Affairs originally arranged for Mr. Zhang to go to Jiangnan Road. Now Mr. Zhang is injured and will not recover for a while, and the exam is imminent. This time the candidate who goes to Jiangnan province may have to be reappointed." Tang Ning thought for a while and asked, "Besides him, are there any suitable candidates?" The doctor of the Ministry of Personnel nodded and said, "Jiangnan Road is very important. In previous years, one of the two ministers would go there. This year, both ministers have important things to attend to, so they can do the next best thing. Sent a doctor. Now the Dr. Gong Kao is injured, as well as the Dr. Si Feng and the Dr. Si Suan." Tang Ning said casually, "Then let's deal with Dr. Si Suan. You can just make arrangements for such a small matter." The doctor from the Ministry of Personnel nodded, cupped his hands and said, "Then I will inform Lang Zhongzhao." Tang Ning only stayed in the Ministry of Personnel for a few days before she discovered a very serious problem. The Ministry of Personnel's method of reporting every detail to the superior was really unfriendly to the superior. No wonder Zhou Shangshu fell ill every now and then. He was still so tired even at his age. Even if he was not sick, he would get sick from exhaustion. He decided to give himself 2 days off. He would spend time with Xiao Ru Xiao tomorrow and Tang Yao Yao the day after tomorrow. The reason why he wanted to accompany Tang Yao Yao was to pretend to be affectionate in front of everyone, and this was actually what rich man Tang asked of him. The reason he gave was that as a bride, if Tang Yao Yao was always alone, others would suspect that her daughter was not welcome at home. How would this be seen by outsiders, and how would the maids and servants of the Tang family see this? Not only that, he also wanted Tang Ning to stay in Tang Yao Yao's room at night as often as Zhongyi and Su Ru, so that the Tang family's maids would not feel that the third lady was not favored. Not only did he have to go shopping with Tang Yao Yao, but he also had to sleep with her. If rich man Tang hadn't explained every detail in detail, Tang Ning would have thought he was crazy. After returning from a day of shopping, Tang Ning looked at Tang Yao Yao and asked, "I'll sleep on the floor tonight. The weather has warmed up recently and the floor isn't too cold. Before today, because of the cold weather and the cold on the ground, he and Tang Yajing were sleeping in the same bed, but she was too dishonest when sleeping. Tang Ning would wake up several times every night due to her tossing, although she woke up several times in the morning. He was sandwiched between her two long legs and held like a rag doll, but that feeling was worse than sleeping on the ground. Tang Yao Yao glanced at him and said, "Do you think I'm very rare to sleep in the same bed with you? You often talk in your sleep at night and wake me up." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "That's better than you drooling when you move around. As a woman, it is a very shameless thing to be criticized for drooling while sleeping." Tang Yao Yao stamped her feet and said angrily, "Who is drooling?" There was a click sound in her ears, and Tang Ning knew without having to lower her head that a certain brick in the yard needed to be replaced again. He swallowed and said, "Actually, what I just wanted to say is that the way you drool is quite cute. In fact, if you think about it from another angle, there is nothing wrong with marrying a wife like Tang Yao Yao. These days, there are not many women who can sleep with him, train with him, and be a bodyguard at critical moments." After comforting herself in this way and thinking about Xiaoju, Tang Ning's mood instantly felt much better. He walked into the Libya Yamen again. As soon as he arrived at the duty room, the doctor from the Libya division walked in quickly and said, "Master Tang, you are finally back." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "What's wrong? What happened again?" "Mr. Zhao, Si Sunsi, was taken away by people from Dali Temple yesterday. It was said that a royal censor found out that he accepted bribes from officials and concealed the truth from the local government when he took exams a few years ago." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "So, the people sent to Jiangnan Road will be changed again?" The official doctor said, "Once Dr. Si Sun's charges are confirmed, he will definitely be questioned. Making a fuss in the exam is a serious crime that the official department will never tolerate." The meritorious doctor was injured, and the Dr. Si Sun was investigated. Tang Ning was slightly surprised. Could it be that Jiangnan Road is really an evil place? Whoever chooses to go there will be unlucky. Thinking about it carefully, he felt that this situation seemed familiar as if he had experienced it himself. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 548. One of the doctors Cao Gong and Si Sun was injured and the other was investigated. This may be a coincidence, but it may not be. If this is not a coincidence, it means that someone does not want them to go to Gangnam Road. If you think about it more deeply, maybe some Beijing officials colluded with local officials in Jiangnan, and there was something they didn't want the officials to see. But they couldn't interfere with the official's decision, so just like him last time, they came up with such a cunning and clever method. Of course, this is just Tang Ning's guess. Maybe it's a coincidence. There are only three things that can happen. If you want to verify whether this is a coincidence, you only need to designate another person to go to Jiangnan Road and see what happens to him. If the next doctor is injured, sick or dies, it means that this is not a coincidence, but a naked conspiracy. Tang Ning looked at the doctor of the Ministry of Personnel Affairs and said, "Mr. Shen." Dr. Shen's face straightened up and he immediately said, "Master Tang, I am one of the chief examiners of this Jiangxi province state examination. I really can't leave." Shen Zhao was not a fool. He had seen the fate of both the Gongkeo doctor and the Si Sun doctor. It was obvious that Jiangnan Road was a hot potato. Whoever touched it would be unlucky. A Taoist friend would die, but a poor Taoist would die. He looked at Tang Ning and said, "Although the official can't leave, Dr. Feng has nothing to do these days, so he can go to Jiangnan Road." To Tang Ning, there was not much difference between whether the next one would be the official doctor or the Feng doctor. He waved his hand and said, "That's it, you can make arrangements." The doctor from the Ministry of Official Affairs cupped his hands and said, "I obey your orders." After arranging this matter, not long after Tang Ning sat down, she saw someone walking in from outside. Tang Ning looked up, stood up, cupped her hands and said with a smile, "Master Fang." Fang Hong returned the gift with his hands raised and said with a smile, "I have been busy with the state examination these days. I only have time to come to the Ministry of Civil Affairs today. Are you still used to everything here? It's not bad. Tang Ning nodded and said, it's just that there are a lot of things to do. Fang Hong smiled and said, that's how the official department is. Now that Zhou Shangshu is ill, Shilang Sun and I also have other things to be busy with. Master Tang may have to work hard for a while. Tang Ning and Fang Hong exchanged a few words. Fang Hong thought of something and asked, I heard from Dr. Shen that something happened to Mr. Zhao and Mr. Zhang, which may delay the merit examination of Jiangnan Dao officials. Mr. Tang has thought carefully about this dispatch. Who went to Gangnam Road? Tang Ning nodded and said, among the 4 divisions, only Dr. Fang seems to be more leisurely these days, so let him go. That's fine. Fang Hong had no objection to this. He just sighed and said, I never thought that Mr. Zhao, who has been in the Ministry of Personnel for many years and is considered an old man in the Ministry of Personnel, would do such a thing, regards the merit examination as child's play, and the least he can do this is exile. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, Mr. Si Sun accepted bribes and protected the place. Has he been convicted? Fang Hong nodded and said, the Yashitai has enough evidence, and we are close to 10. I just came back from Zhang Langhong's house. He was seriously injured. Fortunately, there is still Si Feng Langzhong, otherwise things would not be right. I'm afraid it's going to be difficult. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, is Mr. Zhang seriously injured? Fang Hong said, with 2 broken ribs, I will have to lie in bed for at least 10.5 days. Plus recuperation, I don't know how long it will take. Tang Ning asked in surprise, how did Zhang Langzhong get injured? Fang Hong said, on the way to the Yamen, I was hit by a speeding carriage. The driver ran away after the accident. Although Dr. Zhang was not in danger of his life, his injuries were not serious. The 2 doctors were both about to go to Jiangnan Road. Something happened at the right time, it would be too much of a coincidence. Tang Ning shook her head and said, maybe this is not a coincidence. Fang Hong looked at him and asked, how do you say this? Tang Ning said, if something happens sooner or later, the possibility of something happening to the 2 doctors at the same time is too small. Someone probably doesn't want them to go to Jiangnan Road. They just need to arrange for someone to injure Dr. Zhang and then throw away the evidence of Dr. Zhao. If they go out and let him get involved in lawsuits, they will not be able to protect themselves, and naturally they will not be able to go to Jiangnan, and their goal will be achieved. Master Tang seems to be very familiar with these. Fang Hong looked at him in surprise and said, I always feel that these things seem to have happened somewhere. By the way, in the original Ministry of Rights. Ahem. Tang Ning coughed lightly, picked up the teacup, took a sip, and said, Master Fang, I'm off topic. Tang Ning was quite experienced in certain aspects and was keenly aware of something amiss behind the 2 incidents. However, after all, he was just a temporary worker and there was no need to dig deeper into this matter. Jiangnan is a land of wealth. The sky is high and the emperor is far away. The wealthy families and local officials in Jiangnan and even the imperial court are powerless and beyond the reach of the government. Tang Ning is not a fool in the officialdom. She will not dive in regardless. It may be a thankless job. It caused a lot of commotion. Unless this matter has something to do with the Tang family and King Duan. Whether there is any problem in Jiangnan, let Fang Hong, the real minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, worry about it. In fact, in the capital, people only know about the Tang family, but in fact, the inconspicuous Fang family is the hidden boss. Concubine Fang Shu was as favored as concubine Tang Hui in the palace, and above the court, the 2 brothers Fang Hong and Fang Zhe were in charge of the Ministry of Husbandry and the Ministry of Officials respectively. They were the 2 most important yamen among the 6 departments. King Kong and King Duan had been fighting for the 2 positions of Minister of the Ministry for so long, but neither of them could get one. The Fang family only occupied 2. If King Run was not young, he would not be able to compete for the heir apparent. With the power and connections of the Fang family, King Kong and King Duan could only stay where they wanted. If Emperor Chen did not take action, they would be suppressed by King Run. Of course, at such a young age, Zhao Yuan had a lot of thoughts on picking up girls, and he had no desire to become an emperor. With so many older princes in front of him, no matter how abundant the resources of the Fang family were, it would not help. After the person who went to Jiangnan Road was replaced by Dr. Feng, nothing happened for 2 consecutive days. When they went to the Yamen, Fang Hong and Tang Ning mentioned this matter and said with a smile, "It seems that we have been worrying too much about this matter. Maybe the incident between Zhang Langzhong and Zhao Langzhong is just a coincidence." "Is it a coincidence?" Tang Ning smiled and asked. "Maybe Dr. Feng is the person they need." Fang Hong was startled, with a thoughtful look on his face. Tang Ning did not continue to explain. Although the official was dismissed, he still had other things to do. I don't know where Emperor Chen's interest came from. He suddenly wanted to inspect Zhou Xiaoyi. He had just been sent a message and asked him to go directly to the Zioqi camp from the official department. When Tang Ning arrived on horseback, Chen Huang had already arrived and was reviewing the generals on the school grounds. Tang Ning walked forward quickly, cupped her hands and said, "I see your majesty." No courtesy. Chen Huang waved his hand, looked forward, and praised, "You have taken care of Zhou Xiaoyi very well. Even my Yulanwei does not have this kind of momentum." When the 16th Guards competition was held, it only took a month for them to train 100 people from Zhou Xiaoyi to become the leader of the 16th Guards. Now it has been several months since he took over Zhou Xiaoyi, not to mention letting them no matter how much strength has been improved, at least the mental momentum has been greatly improved. Chen Huang looked at him and asked, "I heard that your Zhou Xiaoyi also has a special operations force. What is it called? What kind of blade is it?" Xiaoju stood beside him and reminded, "Sharp blade. I want to see how powerful your blades are." Huang Chen looked at Tang Ning and said, "It just so happens that I also have a shadow guard with the same number as the blades, 100 people. Why not let them compete?" Tang Ning had heard about Chen Huang's shadow guards. This team was only formed in the past 6 months. They were all elite selected from the Yulan Guards. Judging from the time of formation, the leader of this team should be Gong Sun Ying. The Sharp Blades are a special operations force trained by Lao Zheng. They are good at reconnaissance, stealth, assassination, and rescue. Everyone is an elite among the elites. Tang Ning knows their strength very well. It can't be defeated by a little poison or a few bugs. If Gong Sun Ying takes action in person, he may cause them a lot of trouble, but it is unlikely that Gong Sun Ying will teach them the advanced Gu skills, and it is impossible for them to learn them in such a short time, so Chen Huang showed off a little this time. The competition is completely self-defeating. Tang Ning didn't want to offend the emperor, so she thought for a moment and said, "Your Majesty, the blade members are all training in the back mountain. Just call them out." Emperor Chen waved his hand and said, "I will ask the shadow guards to come over tomorrow to compete with them to see who is more powerful, my shadow guards or your sharp blade." Huang Chen was so insistent that Tang Ning could only sigh and said, "I obey the decree." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 549. Chapter 546 of the main text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun, the competition. 100 members of the Blade are undergoing special training in the back mountain, and a signal flare can call them all back. As the most elite of the Zhou Guards, and also the most rigorously trained and hardest working team, there is no doubt about the strength of the Sharp Blades. Their individual combat capabilities, against ordinary guards, can be 1 against 10. But their greatest strength is their special operations capabilities. Tang Ning tried to adapt them to various extreme environments. After discussing with Lao Zheng, she conducted various targeted training for them to comprehensively improve their overall strength. Of course, Chen Huang's shadow guards should not be underestimated. They are also elite guards and have received special training from Gongsun Ying. They cannot be treated as ordinary opponents. Chen Huang seemed to be very confident in the strength of the shadow guards, and specifically told Tang Ning that this time the competition between the two teams should not be limited to the martial arts field like the 16th Guards competition, which was similar to a performance competition. What he wanted to see was actual combat, the real strength of the two teams, and he chose the venue for the competition on the back hill. The rules of the competition are also very simple. The two teams are divided into two groups, red and blue, competing for each other's waste cards. The player who loses the waste card will be eliminated. The winner will be determined based on the total number of waste cards captured by the two teams. Seeing Huang Chen's confident look, Tang Ning couldn't bear to remind him that they had been living in the mountains for half a month without bringing any water or food. Tang Ning's purpose this time was to train them to survive in the wild. Ability. After they came back last night, they had eaten and drank enough to prepare for today's competition. Before the game begins, the two teams are taken to a specific location in the mountain and wait for a signal flare from the camp. A general of the Shadow Guard walked up to Gongsun Ying and said, "Report to the leader, our people have been assembled." Gongsun Ying glanced at him and said, "In this competition, you can only win, not lose." The general bowed, clasped his fists, and said, "Yes." As soon as he finished speaking, another figure ran up to Tang Ning. After standing still, he straightened his body and said loudly, "Report to the general, the sword should reach 100 people." It turned out to be 100 people. "Please give instructions, General." This unexpected loud voice startled Chen Huang. He looked at the sharp blade captain and felt that the aura of this man seemed to be stronger than that of the Shadow Guard, but he was relieved when he thought of the Shadow Guard's special ability. With Huang Chen here, Tang Ning couldn't tell them what to say to the Shadow Guards. She looked at the sharp blade captain and said, "This competition is just a test of your strength by His Majesty. You don't need to work too hard. You can perform normally just fine." The captain cupped his fists and said, "Take the order." Tang Ning didn't know if he understood what he said. Anyway, he felt that he had said it very straightforwardly. The two teams have set off, and Chen Huang is sitting firmly in the central barracks, looking confident. Tang Ning was just the opposite. He had very little confidence, not in the blade, but in the Shadow Guard. Given Chen Huang's cautious attitude, Tang Ning was really unsure whether he would praise him or blame him if Sharp Blade really won. Emperor Chen looked at him and said, "You don't need to be upset. Even if Sharp Blade loses, I won't blame you. You can make Zhou Xiaoyi, who is at the bottom of the 16th Guards, jump to the top of the 16th Guards. You deserve the most credit." Tang Ning cupped her hands and said politely, "Thank you for the compliment, Your Majesty. This is all the credit of all the soldiers." Chen Huang stood up and said, "This competition only lasts a few days. I'm afraid we won't be able to tell the winner. I'm going back to the palace first. When the time comes, just send me the results. Farewell to Your Majesty." After sending Huang Chen out of the Zioki camp and watching the ceremony go away, Tang Ning looked towards the back mountain and asked, "Is it time?" Xiaoju nodded and said, "That's almost it." Tang Ning looked behind her, and Chen Zhou took out a bamboo tube from his sleeve and lit the fuse. A dazzling white light shot straight into the sky and exploded high in the sky, making a huge noise. After a while, the same loud noise came from the mountain as a response to the start of the competition. According to Chen Huang, this competition is a real battle rather than a performance, and the time is not limited. It is not an easy task to eliminate everyone in the Shadow Guard in the mountains. Xiaoju looked at Tang Ning and asked, "What should we do now?" "Wait. Just wait here." Tang Ning looked at him and said, "There is still something to do with the staff department. I have to go back to the Yamen. If anything happens, Just ask someone to come to the staff department and notify me. He walked a few steps and thought of something again. He looked at Xiaoju and asked, in the imperial court, among the senior officials above the fourth rank, which ones are from Jiangnan? That's too much, Xiaoju said without even thinking. There are many talented people in Jiangnan. Over the years, even the students from Jiangyi have been suppressed by them in the imperial examination. Over the years, many important officials in the court are from Jiangnan. For example, Prime Minister Feng, Zhang Zongshuling, Minister of Industry and so on. Jiangnan is an important place for taxation and education. The status of Jiangnan officials in the court is unbreakable. Tang Ning has some confidence in this, but obviously, the real situation is more serious than he imagined. Xiaoju thought for a while and then said, by the way, when it comes to Jiangnan, the Tang family has the greatest influence in Jiangnan. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, isn't the Tang family a high-ranking family in Jiangyi? Xiaoju shook his head and said, you don't know that although the Tang family's roots are in the capital, most of the Tang family's children marry women from Jiangnan wealthy families. The Tang family has a very close relationship with them. Otherwise, you would think that who is behind the scenes to provide such huge financial support to the Tang family and Prince Duan. This matter was actually something Tang Ning had always wondered about. Many of the powerful people that King Kong relied on all had huge businesses, but the Tang family, which King Duan relied on, rarely got involved in business. Even if Tang Ning wanted to attack, she couldn't find a target. After working on it for a long time, it turns out that the Tang family's source of income lies in Jiangnan. It seemed that the pool of officialdom was much deeper than he thought. When he returned to the official headquarters, in the mountains behind the Zioki camp, the Sharp Blade and Shadow Guard teams were not in a hurry to take action, but were discussing tactics on the spot. The camps of the two teams are several miles apart, and they are only temporary camps. After starting the operation, they must be abandoned, otherwise they will be waiting for the other party to come and encircle them. In a certain clearing in the mountain forest, the Shadow Guard general divided 100 people into 10 groups of 10 people each. Then he called the 10 captains over and warned. The leader said, this battle can only be won, not defeated. We must not lose to people like Zhou Xiaoyi. Take orders. Take orders. Take orders. Everyone spoke one after another, and the general waited for everyone to calm down and said, we are the Shadow Guards. We don't have to confront them head on. Whether we use poison or poison, just make sure we win. A forest several miles away. A young man squatted on the tree, looked at the people below, and said, the general said, those guys will make some heresy, so I am very energetic. If anyone hinders the Sharp Blade, I will kill him, who will be taken out and trained alone for a month. One person looked up at him and asked, boss, what did General Tang just say to you? The general said, let us perform normally without working too hard. The young man looked at them and said, although the general said this, it is just a comfort. You all cheer up and use all your abilities. Do it all. Remember, this is not a drill. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 550. The text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun, Chapter 547, Crushing the Ministry of Personnel. Trivial matters are what Tang Ning encounters most when he travels through the 6 ministries. Other ministries may have nothing to do on weekdays and are very idle, but the Ministry of Personnel is different. Official promotions, examinations, nobles, royal relatives, and all upper-class people in the state of Chen are under the overall planning of the Ministry of Personnel. Tang Ning was busy all afternoon and didn't even have time to drink a cup of tea. When he picked up the teacup, he found that there was no tea in the cup. He was about to pour tea, and suddenly someone picked up the teapot, helped him fill the cup, and smiled, "Don't be too tired, Master Tang, your health is important." Sifeng Langzhong is the best at observing words and expressions among the 4 Langzhongs of the Ministry of Personnel, and he also looks the most honest. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Dr. Feng, are you here to hand over the list of the Sifeng division?" Dr. Feng put a thick book on the table and said, "Yes, this is the list of the ladies in the capital compiled by our department. I will leave it here so as not to disturb you. I will take my leave first." Tang Ning nodded, and when Dr. Feng was about to leave the duty room, he asked casually, from Dr. Feng's accent, he should be from the south, right? Dr. Feng stopped and turned around and said, "Your Excellency, my ancestral home is Runzhou. I settled in the capital after passing the imperial examination." Tang Ning waved his hand and said, "It's okay, you can go and do your work. Runzhou belongs to the east road of Jiangnan." In this way, this doctor of the Sifeng division is a genuine Jiangnan person. The 2 officials sent by the Ministry of Personnel to Jiangnan both got into trouble, but after Dr. Feng, an official from Jiangnan, was replaced, everything was calm. This coincidence is too coincidental. However, Tang Ning did not intend to investigate the matter further. The problem in Jiangnan had been going on for more than 1 or 2 days. Even Emperor Chen was powerless to deal with it, and Tang Ning did not want to get into trouble. His current troubles had not been completely resolved yet, and he did not know how the confrontation between the Blade and the Shadow Guard was going. As a special operations force, they had just undergone half a month of mountain terrain training. He hoped that they would not go too far and leave some pitiful face for Emperor Chen. The back mountain of the cavalry camp. When the 2 teams of Shadow Guards found the Blade camp, they found that the camp was empty and no Blade member could be seen. This was not unexpected. After all, the opponents were not fools and would not wait there stupidly. They were afraid that they were already spying in the dark and preparing to attack them. The leader of the Shadow Guard looked around and said, "Act alone as a team of 10. Once you find the enemy, take action immediately and don't be soft." He gave such instructions to the members of the other team, and the 2 teams separated on the spot and disappeared into the forest. At the same time, the members of another team of Shadow Guards were carefully searching in the forest. The 10 of them were separated by several steps, ensuring the search range, but not too far away. As long as one person was attacked, the 10 people could quickly gather together. A team leader searched for a while, and then immediately said, "Count." He called 1 first, and the people behind him counted according to the distance until 10. This was a method they had discussed before leaving the camp. 2, 3, 8, 9. After he finished speaking, the sound of counting continued to come from behind him, until someone shouted 9, and no one answered. The team leader stopped and asked, "Where is Zhang Xing?" Everyone stopped and looked around, and finally someone said in horror, Zhang Xing is gone." The team leader was shocked and angry when he heard this. They hadn't even seen the other side's people, and one of their own people was missing first. If this continues, how can they beat them? He frowned and said, "Look." Everyone gathered together and searched along the way they came, but they couldn't find the missing teammate. Someone asked in a trembling voice, "Could it be some wild beast?" The team leader shook his head and said, "If it was a wild beast, we couldn't have heard the sound. It must be the Blades people. Everyone, get closer and pay attention to the surroundings." Faced with this strange situation, he slowed down and issued the next order. The 9 people who stayed behind got closer and felt much more at ease. There was no such strange atmosphere. What they didn't know was that as they slowly moved forward, pairs of eyes were watching them in the shade of the trees above their heads and in the grass beside them. At a certain moment, the captain said again, "Count. 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. Where's 9, where's Wang Dong?" One looked behind him and said in horror, "Captain, Captain, Wang Dong is gone too." Seeing that it was about to get dark, they had already lost 2 people, but they didn't even see the shadow of the opponent. Even though they were all elite guards, they couldn't help but panic at this moment. Even if they all knew how to poison or be poisoned, they couldn't use any advanced poison techniques without seeing the opponent. Looking at the darkening sky, someone finally couldn't help but say, "Captain, it's getting dark, why don't we go back to the camp first?" "Yes, Captain, it's dark, and the road is not clear. It would be bad if we encounter any poisonous insects or beasts. Let's go back first. I just seemed to hear some beasts calling in front of us. Let's go back to the camp first." After one person made a suggestion, the others immediately agreed. People are naturally afraid of darkness, not to mention that in this strange deep mountain, the inexplicable disappearance of teammates has already put them under great psychological pressure, not to mention that no one knows what kind of dangers there are in the darkness ahead. The team leader actually had the intention to return to the camp a long time ago. He pretended to be in deep thought for a moment and slowly said, "It will be dark soon," which is not conducive to our actions. "Return to the camp immediately." When the remaining 8 people returned along the original route, several long hidden figures finally moved not far from them. The night was completely shrouded, and the Shadow Guard team began to return along the original route. This was agreed before they left the camp. They would return to the camp at night and meet up, and then act again during the day. In half a day's work, there were quite a few casualties among the 10 teams. What's more strange is that most of them didn't even see the shadow of the opponent. On the way back to the camp, a certain team suddenly heard a low roar in front of them. One person hurried forward and said, "Captain, it's bad, there's a blind bear ahead." The team leader's face changed and he said, "Go back by a detour." A moment later, in the Shadow Guard camp, it was already a quarter of an hour past the agreed time to return to the camp. The general looked gloomy and asked, "Count the number of people." One person walked over and counted, and soon ran back and reported, 76 people returned. The 5th team was wiped out, including the team leader. No one returned. The Shadow Guard general looked gloomy. The first day of the battle ended in their defeat. They had not even seen the enemy, but had already lost 24 people. How could they compete? He looked around and said, "Let's have someone guard here at night. Be alert and beware of their sneak attacks." An assistant officer said, "Captain, we haven't eaten all day." The Shadow Guard leader thought for a moment and said, "Send 10 people out to see if there are any rabbits or pheasants around the camp. Bring some back. Don't go too far from the camp." When the atmosphere in the other Shadow Guard teams was tense, the 5th team seemed much more relaxed. In the temporary camp of the Sharp Blade, they saw the 2 missing members of the team again, including the other 14 Shadow Guard teammates. Of course, they also saw the true face of the Sharp Blade. Most of their clothes were painted green, and their faces were black and white. Although they looked ugly, no one dared to look down on them. After all, the other party was dressed in such an ugly outfit, rushed out of the bushes, jumped down from the tree, covered their mouths at a speed that they could not react, and knocked them out directly. However, although being caught was embarrassing, at least there was no need to face the fear of the unknown with trepidation, which could be regarded as a relief. When everyone breathed a sigh of relief, they suddenly heard a low roar. A young man with mud on his face turned his head and asked, "What's going on?" Another person came over and smiled, "The guys from the 5th team killed a blind bear when they came back today." The young man's eyes suddenly lit up, and he strode over and said, "It's just right, we can have an extra meal tonight." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 551. The text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun Chapter 548, Jiangnan changes. It has been 2 days since Shadow Guard and Sharp Blade entered the mountain. Before the victory or defeat is decided, no news will be released. After such a long time, there is still no news, which makes Tang Ning start to have a bad feeling. After all, Shadow Guard is the elite of Yulin Guard, and they are also equipped with poison. If Sharp Blade fights them face to face, although he can still win, it will not be easy. If Sharp Blade regards them as real enemies, he will do his best to win at the lowest cost, using camouflage, terrain, and even traps to eliminate the enemies one by one. After all, the purpose of Sharp Blade's existence is not to train 100 invincible generals. On the real battlefield, 100 people can play a small role. Their training direction is more inclined to a kind of cunning way. From the perspective of time, it is very likely that they will choose the latter method. When Tang Ning re-entered Zhouziaoyi, the atmosphere in the camp was obviously different. Everyone had a smile on their face and the atmosphere was jubilant. Xiaoju saw him, strode over and said, "You came just in time. I was just about to have someone inform you that the Shadow Guards and the Blade have come out of the mountain. The winner has been decided." Tang Ning asked, "Who won?" "Of course we won," Xiaoju said. "As a matter of course, all 100 Shadow Guards have been captured alive. We only lost 5 people, and they were caught off guard by their poison. I thought your Majesty's guards were so powerful, but it turns out they are just like this." Captain Blade came over, walked in front of Tang Ning, stood still, and said loudly, "General, the mission has been completed. Please give your instructions." Sure enough, it was just as he expected, but facing them, he couldn't blame or complain. Tang Ning waved his hand with a bit of exhaustion and said, "Everyone has worked hard. Let's take a day off today and continue training tomorrow. Winning is winning, and it's so easy to win. Will he tell Emperor Chen that your guards are all a bunch of scumbags? It's better to disband them early." He looked at Chen Zhou and said, "Prepare the horses and go to the palace. The training of Sharp Blades is very hard. It is rare to have a day of rest. With this day of free time, everyone's spirits are quite uplifted. But there are exceptions. The 5 people who were accidentally poisoned by the Shadow Guards and had their badges taken away stood in the martial arts field in shame, lowered their heads, and had no face to look at everyone again. The Sharp Blade captain named Lu Tong looked at them and said, "Don't rest today. As a member of the Sharp Blade, you were tricked by the Shadow Guards. Do you still have the face to rest?" The 5 people were punished to continue training in the martial arts field. A team leader looked at Lu Tong and asked in confusion, "Boss, although we won this time, General Tang doesn't seem very happy." Lu Tong glanced at him and asked, "Can General Tang be happy with these 5 unpromising guys? If I were General Tang, I wouldn't be happy either." Tang Ning stood at the door of the imperial study, and an eunuch went in to inform Emperor Chen. Emperor Chen said 2 days ago that as long as the 2 teams were determined, the results would be sent immediately, so he did not delay and prepared his horse to enter the palace as soon as possible. After a while, the eunuch came in and said, "Sir Tang, the emperor wants you to come in." Emperor Chen was reviewing memorials. When Tang Ning walked in, he looked up and asked, "How is it? Is my Shadow Guard better, or is your Sharp Blade better?" Tang Ning bowed and said, "Your Majesty, you are wrong. Whether it is the Shadow Guard or the Sharp Blade, they are all your soldiers. I am just training them for your Majesty." Emperor Chen nodded and said, "There is some truth in what you said." Tang Ning corrected him, "It is not a little truth. That's the fact." Emperor Chen seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly put down the memorial, raised his head, looked at him and asked, "Did the Shadow Guard lose?" "Your Majesty is wise." Tang Ning nodded and said, "In this competition, the Shadow Guard is slightly better." Emperor Chen thought for a while and asked, "Slightly better, how much is this?" Tang Ning handed over a memorial and said, "The detailed battle situation is in this memorial." Wei Jian walked down, took the memorial and handed it over. After Emperor Chen opened it and looked at it, his face was a little unnatural. Li Jian captured all 100 shadow guards at the cost of 5 people. Isn't this a slap in his face? The emperor's personal guards, also his most proud guards, are so vulnerable. Even if it is as Tang Ning said just now, whether it is shadow guards or Li Jian, they all belong to him, but shadow guards are on duty in the palace, so he naturally prefers shadow guards in his heart. Tang Ning looked up at Emperor Chen and said, "If your majesty has no other instructions, I will take my leave first." Emperor Chen must be unhappy now. If he stayed here any longer, he would be suspected of watching the fun. Thinking of the boast he made in front of Tang Ning yesterday, Emperor Chen also felt a little embarrassed. He waved his hand and said, "You go down first." After Tang Ning left, Emperor Chen's face darkened and he said, "Call Gong Sunying over." Gong Sunying had not yet learned the outcome of the shadow guard and the blade, but when he walked into the hall and saw Emperor Chen's face, he probably guessed what was going on. His face changed slightly, and he knelt down on the ground and said, "Your Majesty." Emperor Chen threw the letter in front of her and said, "Take a look for yourself." Gong Sunying opened the letter, looked at it, and his face turned even paler. He gritted his teeth and explained, "Your Majesty, the shadow guards have only been trained for a short time. When they really learn the witchcraft, no one will be their opponent. Your Majesty has also seen with your own eyes that the current Yulin guards are no match for the shadow guards." Emperor Chen knew that the shadow guards were stronger than the Yulin guards, but he didn't expect that the gap between them and the people trained by Tang Ning was so big. He summoned Gong Sunying because he was full of anger and couldn't vent it. This person still had some effect on him. He calmed down a little and just sat down when a young eunuch came in, walked quickly to the front, put a secret letter on the table, and said, "Your Majesty, urgent report from the secret agent in Jiangnan." Emperor Chen raised his eyebrows. Jiangnan. His secret agents were spread all over the states and prefectures. They were very hidden on weekdays. If there was nothing important, they would not report to the capital, let alone an urgent report. Jiangnan is the place where the court relies on for taxation. Once there is a change, it will have a huge impact on the court. He tore open the secret letter and stood up suddenly after reading the contents above. His face became completely gloomy. When he heard Jiangnan, Gong Sunying raised his head, and saw Chen Wang's expression change again. He seemed to have thought of something, clenched his fists, and a trace of anxiety appeared in his eyes. After Tang Ning left the palace, he went straight home. Chen Huang, who was good at face, didn't want to see the competition. He wanted to see the strength of the shadow guards. If he had known that the guys of Li Jian were stubborn, he would have made it clearer at the beginning. Even if Li Jian still won in the end, everyone pretended to be a little more like a match, making it look like they were evenly matched, so that the result was not so different, and Chen Huang felt better. When he felt bad, he would find ways to make others feel bad. Tang Ning was well aware of Emperor Chen's love of face and pettiness, but he was not sure if he was so petty that he would give him a hard time just because he lost a game. In the backyard of the Tang family, Zhao Man saw that he looked worried, sat down near him, and asked, "What's wrong? Is the work of the Ministry of Personnel difficult?" Tang Ning shook his head and said, "It's not the Ministry of Personnel, it's your father." Zhao Man blinked and asked in surprise, "What's wrong with father?" Tang Ning told Zhao Man the result of the competition between Shadow Guard and Blade. She smiled, leaned her head on Tang Ning's shoulder, and said, "Don't worry, although father is indeed a little stingy, he is not stingy to this extent. Son-in-law, son-in-law." As soon as she finished speaking, Qing ran in from outside in a panic and said, "Son-in-law, someone came from the palace and said that the emperor wants you to enter the palace immediately." Rong Xiaorong said. "Thank you Chen Chun Mu Shen, Zizizian Zixiao and Shuer for the reward."